My name is Mehul. I'm now an advisor for Uplift K-12. So we started in 2020 during the pandemic, and we're a teaching platform predominantly, helping bring interactivity into the classroom in a digital sense. So the activities that we have on our website are multiplayer. So students and teachers or students and tutors can access virtual manipulatives. They can access games and they can access independent practice, lessons, guided practice. One thing that sets us apart is that we have a lot of movement on our platform during the pandemic, especially when schools shut down. We noticed that a lot of schools were just using Zoom or Teams. And for students with learning differences and students who need maybe more visual, more movement in their lesson, they weren't getting the kind of education that we felt they deserved. And so that's why we came up with this idea. And our first school sale after creating our MVP was in 2021. So we moved pretty quickly and we sold to 5 districts. One of the biggest challenges that we found, and this was before we met Griffith, was that we were able to get sales. People were interested. They loved our demos. They would purchase. They just weren't using it. And, from what we hear from research and, stats that you hear about ed tech software, a lot of it's true. Like, maybe like 30 to 60% of software is actually getting utilized. The rest of it is sitting on a shelf somewhere. There's a lot of products out there. And so, especially in ed tech, I feel like we have this responsibility to create value. There's limited time in the day when the teachers are with the kids, and even more limited time in a teaching block. And so when we're in there substituting something else that can be used in the classroom, when we looked at data and saw that we weren't getting a lot of usage, we went back to the drawing board. We are now on an impact journey, and we've been on one for the last couple of years, trying to make sure that we're providing value. Because without getting these customers coming back, without providing the amount of value that we feel we don't think we should be moving on to the next stages. And so we've been really working hard on talking to customers and making sure that our tool is delivering what we say. So a little bit about Michelle. She was a Montessori teacher for 10 years. And so using manipulatives and using hands-on tools was just like, it was tier one. It was, what you do to teach in Montessori. My experience also as a teacher, now product manager, was very similar, that I taught intervention. So I was helping kids accelerate, helping them grow from a first grade level to get them back onto grade level. And so that's kind of our background as well. So where are we now? After a few years, I think it's going to be 3 years this May. So about 2.5 years or so, almost 3. We created this idea with evidence from research. We found some research advisors who were working specifically in the CRA method. And we talked to 4 or 5 of them, and all of them wanted to be a part of this startup. And so we now have a group of advisors that we meet with monthly. It's important to us that we're research-based. So we know that the tools that we're building are informed by science. Define impact by, so we joined the Recharge Rally with Griffith in 2021. And so that, I think, set us on a different path in a really good way. And I could talk a little bit more about that as one of the benefits of working with an impact partner in general, but specifically the logic model I have been using consistently from 2021 for grant applications, to be able to explain what we do and to be able to guide our daily practice to make sure that we're delivering and measuring impact. That's been really important to us so far. We recently also started, and I think this is one of the hardest things is using actual users for user testing and for delivering our product and building our product. We started actually implementing this practice into our work every 2 to 3 months, as opposed to once a year, or informally adding participants into focus groups or walkthroughs. We now work with UX and UI researchers and designers, which we weren't doing before, but we have found so much value in ongoing user testing, and actually have a book called Continuous Discovery Habits by Teresa Torres that I recommend. Also really help guide us with user testing and understanding how your users are, using your product and gaining value from it as you're building, growing. We were winners of last year's tools competition to set up a data capture system, and we basically are collecting interaction data, like the student moved an object or typed into the box. Where did they move it? Without us actually having to watch the student, what we created a data system that allows the teacher to not be present, but to still be able to see and get a good understanding of what a student's misconceptions may be just by the movements that they make from their manipulatives. What's next is that now that we have a lot of this data collected, so we are utilizing AI to try to find patterns with these movements through pathways and thinking about like where a student starts with a prompt, what actions do they take to get to the next step? And if they make a correct step and they go on this correct pathway, what is it that might have gotten them there? If they don't take the correct step, why? What can they do on the screen as an accessibility feature, like a video or a read aloud that could potentially help them? And when they finally get to an answer, was that answer a common misconception or was it the correct answer? And having that information can then allow the teacher to take action on that student's work in real time instead of like having to wait a couple weeks to get data back. So like an on-time data tracking system and analytics system that's next. We're going to continue monitoring impact and continue talking to users. So what worked for us, and this is coming from, 3 years of experience here, but then we also had another startup before this for 3 years, and we were able to grow that startup to around 500,000 revenue before we sold it. And what worked, I would say for us, things that I didn't even know about was having a clear logic model. I feel like one of the biggest challenges that I had in my last startup was raising money. We were making money, but a lot of people were confused about what we were doing, what our impact was, and what exactly principals and teachers were getting out of our work. Even though we would try our best to explain it, there was no like logical flow and there was no organized structure to that process. So having that clear logic model, I think this is like the foundation of everything you do. And having that logic model, which I've heard being used in some of these applications, I think it's helped us. Like in one application, actually, as an appendix, I think I added a logic model just so they could see that like we are, thinking about these things and making sure that we're following frameworks that we know are valid and work. This is something we picked up as well along the way, is having a North Star metric. The North Star metric for us has been our daily users. Like I was saying before, when we got those sales and we weren't getting daily users, we wanted to increase that number. And with that increase, we feel like we can make an assumption that people are getting value out of it. And tied into talking to customers, that data, that metric, along with the actual like voice of the customer, allows us to see what kind of impact we're making. I think focusing on that North Star has really helped us. We've been networking and brainstorming with other entrepreneurs. That's helped us. Finding those advisors has been really, really important. And I would highly recommend that, especially now when I feel like there's changes happening in ed tech. I'm sure you all realize it's harder to make sales. It's harder to get in front of a principal. It's harder to get their time. And we're starting to see a lot more data collection practices and like requests for impact before schools will invest in you. Having that grounding in research, I think, is really important. And finding researchers who have committed their careers to thinking about these things is also really important to make sure that you're at least thinking about the product in the right way as you're delivering and building it to your customer. So this is just very honest, like what didn't work for us. I think accelerators can be great, have the potential to be great, but they haven't helped us. I think that accelerators in general are very heavy on theory and they're very like one size fits all. They don't focus on what we need. And so as I'm like sitting and listening about product market fit and the fact that we need to talk to customers, and I think that all that stuff is important, but after a while, it just gets very repetitive. It's like, well, what exactly do we need to do? I think the answer to that was you need to create a logic model. Like you need to understand where you're headed before you can really even start talking to customers. And then just start talking to customers and let the customers help you figure out what you need to do. I think the thinking around my business has been great with accelerators, but I feel like in general, I've been pushed behind a couple times instead of just following, the steps that we know work. Another thing that didn't work for us was following assumptions. And this is one of the toughest things. And it's a pretty general rule in and out of ed tech is don't follow assumptions. You have to validate them. Even though you think that what you have is really awesome, is going to save time, are people going to pay for it? And does the market know what this is? Have they seen it before? If they haven't seen it before, then you have to take a different approach to validate the assumptions that you have. Don't assume that just because competitors doing the same thing that you can go in and do and just compete with them straight out of the box. There's a lot of pieces to what they've built that you may have not seen, especially around like customer experience and around the technology that they've built and the communication that they have set aside. I'm also someone who doesn't like to spend money unless I have a really good feeling it's going to make it an impact. I would say that if I were to do it all over again, I would just have paid Kripa to just consult and to help me get through some of the toughest parts of building the business and thinking through the logic model and the impact model as I was building. I've had to go back so many times and rebuild things that were just built without having impact in mind and having value in mind. So those are some things that I wish I could change. Make sure that whoever you're working with as an impact partner, that you make sure that they're in ed tech. And if you're in ed tech, then make sure the person's in ed tech. If you're not, find someone in your market that understands and values what you're working on. Anyone will work with you, but you have that ability to choose who's going to be the best partner for you and your company. And going to tip 3 is like, there's I think a limited number of impact partners in ed tech, but then an even more limited number of them that are experienced and able to personalize for you. Like whether you're like a very entry level founder versus even like a series C, I think that there's a lot of value in finding someone that's had experience in all different levels and can guide you based on where you are, and not just like send you some videos and just have you kind of learn on your own. I think that they should have an understanding of product design, and they should be able to help you build impact into it. So if you have further questions about any of these things, you can feel free to reach out to me.